your topic. Sometimes your questions end up being topics, like the whole class it becomes an answer to your question. So that's also something we can discuss. Hare Krishna. Gauranga Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinam. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvisesha Shanyavari Uschati Satarine. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Panchakapaturbyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Mukam Karuti Vachalam Pangolangayate Girim Yakrapatamam Bande Sri Guru Dinatarinam. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare. First question from Juliana. If you look in the chat, you can see the question. How do we deal with being nervous we will mess up an opportunity Krishna gave us? Fear of disappointing him. Well, I think the first thing we have to answer is, how do you disappoint Krishna? How is that possible? Because I think what what we think disappoints Krishna maybe doesn't. This morning I was reading something, and you may have heard this. Krishna is not hungry or thirsty, but when you offer him something in love, it makes him hungry and thirsty. Have you heard that before? Like Krishna does, well, what does he need to eat, right? He's God. But when the bhakta offers with love, it makes him hungry to eat that because he wants that love. And that love translates for us into whatever love we have, whatever devotion we have, whatever sincerity we have. Sometimes our love is simply the desire to have love, like I don't have it, but I desire to have it. And that's my love for Krishna, is my desire to have it. So Juliana, you have to start with where you're at. So you can't. So if you think, well, someday when I'm pure, Krishna will be pleased with me. That means for now, there's no way to please him. And so you just have to suffer for the next 50 years till you become more advanced and be stressed out and have a nervous breakdown. And if everyone in the Hare Krishna movement thought like that, we'd have to have a psychiatric ward next to the temple, to help everybody who's stressed out because Krishna doesn't, because everybody thinks Krishna is not pleased with them. And in the verse, Patra Pushpam Palam Toyam, offer me a leaf, fruit, flower, water. As you've probably noticed, leaf, fruit, flower, water is pretty insignificant and available everywhere. So Krishna is not demanding anything very great. So if we spread that idea, so well, he only wants a leaf, fruit, flower, water. So in terms of my service, does he need perfection? If you want to do kirtan, do you have to be in the finals of America's Got Talent before you qualify for kirtan? No. You just have to sing with devotion. That's what pleases Krishna. And so the beautiful thing is that all of us can have devotion right now. Like all of us can do something for Krishna with devotion Like, and what does devotion mean? It means Anyabhilashita Shunyam. Krishna, I do this for you. Want to hear something interesting? You know that verse in Bhagavad Gita? Yad Kurosi Yad Yahashi Yad Kurosi Yad Ishnasi Yad Jehoshi Dadasi Yad. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer and give away, do that for me. Well, that's bhakti mixed with karma. It's not pure bhakti. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, Krishna spoke that to Arjuna because he wasn't ready for pure bhakti. That's all he could do. But at the end of the Gita, he was ready, and then he spoke Sarvadharman Purityajya, fully surrendered. But Prabhupada put us on the fast track because he explained what pure bhakti is, like right away. Like, right, do this. If you please your guru, that's pure bhakti. If you do something to satisfy your guru, satisfy the Vaishnavas, make them happy, that's pure bhakti. You just have to do it sincerely with the desire to please Krishna. Uh, Excuse me. Mm. Hare Krishna. Mm. So in a sense, it's easy to please Krishna, easier than you think. And I think um, that fear of disappointing Krishna can be healthy and it can be unhealthy. Because I want to do it well, I want to do it nicely. Oh, that's good. But you might think everything I do is bad, even when it's not. And that's just material conditioning. Um, for example, you will read in my new book on self-care whenever we finish it. We're working on it. We're like a third of the way through. But you will read something which is very interesting. And that is the standards by which we judge ourselves as how qualified we are, or how good we are, or how much bhakti we have, or how acceptable we are, how worthy we are, and so forth, are not the same standards by which Krishna judges us. So the idea of like, why would Krishna like me, and so forth, um, that often comes from the fact I don't even like myself. So, I do so many things I shouldn't do, and then I think, why did I do that? I hate myself when I do that. Or I make an offering, and I'm really hungry, and I make it in 10 seconds instead of 10 minutes. And I think, oh, I have no bhakti for Krishna, or I could do more, could get up earlier, chant more rounds, or whatever. It's not exactly what Krishna is looking at. In one place, Prabhupada said, it's all about your sincerity. And sincerity means Krishna, as we said before. I just want you to be happy with this offering. Um, I was thinking this morning, and I've talked about this before. Very beautiful thought about japa. Patra pushpam palam toyam. Just offer me a leaf, fruit, flower, water with love. In that verse, Krishna uses the word with love twice, or once with love and once I accept it with someone who has love, who gives it with love. So I was thinking this morning, what about japa? Like, what about every mantra we offer to Krishna in the same way? Isn't that a beautiful, beautiful thought for japa? What do you think? Like every mantra I'm going to offer like I would make an offering to the deity with love. Like, what am I? I'm offering this to Krishna. And so then Krishna says, Ashnami prayatatmana. Ashnami prayatatmana means I accept it from someone who has love. So I'm chanting japa and I'm wondering, is Krishna accepting my mantras? Am I offering them with love, at least love relative to what I can manifest as love, not prema? If I say, are you offering your mantra with prema? The answer is definitely no. I don't have prema. I'm on a much lower stage. But if I'm offering with love relative to who I am, and by definition, defining love as my desire to please Krishna, then we can say, yes, Krishna, please accept this mantra I offer it to you for your pleasure. We could do that, right? Yes? Raise your hand if you can do that. Raise your hand if you can try to do it. Raise your hand if you've given up. So, really interesting thing I think is, well, not interesting, but very important. If you look at your life, you can think of so many things you did which you wish you hadn't done. Like if you could rewind the movie of your life, you could pick let's delete that scene right there where I acted this way. And, we could go through and especially this scene right here, definitely delete this because I don't want to remember this the rest of my life. What I did was so bad. And when Krishna looks at our life, he doesn't look at the past reel. He looks at you now. He doesn't care. Like we care, right? We look and say, I'm so fallen. I've done so many bad things, isn't it? I mean, we don't have amnesia. We remember the bad things. And the bad things we did often make us feel very bad and then make us feel like, well, I wonder how Krishna feels about all those bad things I did. Krishna is concerned about what you're doing right now, not what you did 10 years ago. That's good news, isn't it? So when you're analyzing, like, I don't have devotion, this and that, part of that analysis may be that you're looking at your life, or maybe even your life as a devotee, where you've maybe matured beyond some of those mistakes. So it's nice to know that Krishna, excuse me, that Krishna is not looking at the same things you're looking at. So you think you're a failure. In a higher stage of bhakti, that's humility. I'm a failure. I don't have any bhakti. Because when you finally have love for Krishna, then you will feel you don't have any bhakti. That's natural feeling. But Prabhupada is asking us to serve Krishna with love, with sincerity, and so forth. And because he's asking us to do that, it means we can do it. He wouldn't ask us to do it if we couldn't. So I think that's important. Because Prabhupada does use the word love, serve Krishna with love. He uses that word. So that means there's some definition of love that's relative to us now that we can employ in Krishna service, according to Prabhupada. Did I do this sincerely? Did I do it with love? And if I didn't, next time, how can I do it better? And if Krishna sees that you're trying to improve, then he's pleased. So Juliana, if you're looking at like perfectly serving Krishna, and that translates to pleasing him, you may never do it perfectly. Because by your definition of perfection may be much different than Krishna's. So you have to work on Krishna's definition, not yours. Because your definition of perfection is like, yeah, my parents will think I'm perfect or something, which they never will. Or or my parents think I'm perfect, but everybody else doesn't. You know, they're just being nice. So if I can, Patra Pushpam Palam Tayam Yome Bhakta Prayachiti, if I can offer something with bhakti, Krishna says, Ashnami, I will accept it. Then what more could you ask? And he accepted it. You go out and get a flower, put on your altar and say, Krishna, can you accept this? And if he accepts it, like what else do you need? You don't need to win American Idol. You don't need to be rich, famous, and successful. So that's your perfection. That Krishna will be pleased. Prabhupada said, well, it's a verse. If Krishna is pleased, Jagat Tushta, the whole world is pleased. So Prabhupada said many times, if you can please Krishna, like what more could you want? Like what higher achievement could there be if you know Krishna's pleased? It's like if we did something and Prabhupada said, I'm pleased. For us, that was like the highest achievement of our life. Even if we just distributed one book. Said, thank you very much, I'm very pleased. Thank you for dressing the deities. They look beautiful. For us, that was like, oh, I pleased Prabhupada, which means I pleased Krishna, which means like there's no higher achievement than that. And all I did was sell one book. Like that wasn't that hard. But I did it sincerely. Hare Krishna. So if pleasing Krishna were difficult, I don't even think Prabhupada would have come to America. So maybe your fear is the fear of disappointing yourself, maybe more than the fear of disappointing Krishna. So this is such an important point that in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada and the other acharyas, they teach us how Krishna thinks. They often, like you'll read a purport, and they'll often explain Krishna's mentality. So we know what he likes and what he doesn't like, what pleases him, what doesn't please him. Because that's true with anybody, right? You want to buy somebody a gift, you have to know what they like. Sometimes you ask them, I want to get you a Christmas present. What do you want? So we learn from Prabhupada and the Acharyas what Krishna likes, how he thinks. So that and then when we understand that, we won't have these fears, oh, I'm not pleasing Krishna, because we know what he wants. And those other fears are probably just, we feel we're letting ourselves down. Mm. Prabhupada was very easily pleased. If you dress the deities nicely, or you organize some program, you opened a center, or in some way try to spread Krishna consciousness, he would praise you. He would shower his praises. Thank you, I'm very pleased. And we're thinking, what did I do? I just, went to a city 100 miles away from where I live and found a little house and We rented it and started doing Sunday feasts, and we would go downtown and chant. And not that difficult. And Prabhupada saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very pleased. All right, that's it. Despite all the horrible things we've ever done and all the horrible things we're thinking right now, et cetera, we do some service that pleases Prabhupada. He's easily pleased. And we think, oh, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Right? Ever feel like that? And, so it's like we think like Krishna's ungrateful or something. Or it's like, oh, Juliana, you're just like a conditioned soul. You've been in terrible forever. Like, who cares about you? Call me up when have prana. Till then, like, who cares about you? It's not like that. He doesn't think like that. And we might think that he thinks like that because that's how people in this world think. Hare Krishna. I didn't finish breakfast, so we're going to multitask here. Hare Krishna. If that's okay. I might choke on this, but anyway, give me time to think. I came in and did class into my office, but you needed cleaning. And I had this idea to set up a different mic so it's not in front of me. So I actually have a mic above me. So I'm free, I'm liberated. And I started eating breakfast 8 minutes before class started. And I thought my wife was going to make breakfast, but she didn't. So I had to make, didn't take much, but I'm still hungry and I have to eat a lot. So please excuse me. I'm trying to gain weight. As of 2 days ago, I gained 2 kgs or like 4 pounds. So before that, I was going down every day. Like, when's it going to stop? I'm going to like evaporate. This was good news, right? And so far, so good. We've gone almost a half hour and I'm still talking. That's good, right? And I'm not coughing. Good sign. And I can also walk upstairs now, which a month ago, I practically fainted when I walk upstairs. So, but strength-wise, I would lose an arm wrestling match with a skinny woman. I have to build my strength. I have no strength, muscle strength. Seriously. So, but I'm working on that. Hare Krishna. We'll get back to normal. It'll take time. I was at the gym the other day and there was a devotee woman there. So you set everything on. You're gonna have weights and you set the weights. And everything she had set on, I couldn't lift. She's like, so I go after her and I can't lift this. So I'm quite weak. But we're working on it. Hare Krishna. If you're a Brahmin, you should always have a water with you. So whenever you touch your mouth or drink water or eat, you can wash your hands. Or if you want to be a Brahmin, well, if you don't want to be a Malecha, that's a better way of saying it. Once Shruti Kirti was cooking for Prabhupada, a little kitchen in Prabhupada's quarters. It was a separate room. And after Prabhupada ate, Shrutikirti threw all the orange pills in the trash can in the kitchen. So things which we eat really shouldn't go back in the kitchen. They should go outside. And Prabhupada walked by the kitchen and he saw all the orange pills in the trash can. And Prabhupada said, simply malecha, simply malecha. Anyway, we have to learn how not to be malechas, and one way is to wash your hands. Okay, we'll go to the next question. So, yeah, the question is how to be a Brahmin, or maybe the question is how not to be a malecha before I become a Brahmin. Stage one. All right, we have a question. It seems that the most powerful realizations always come when we suffer. Why is that? Because it is. I had that realization in the hospital, if you remember. What I was saying is that when we suffer, we realize we're not Krishna. When everything's good, we have some realization that I, in some way, can enjoy. Right? You know, when the summer comes and you're walking on the beach and everything's nice. It's very easy to think things are enjoyable. When we're suffering, we don't think that way. Of course, a pure devotee doesn't think that way. So when we suffer, we realize I'm not the enjoyer. I'm not the controller, right? What else? There's three. Enjoyer, controller, and I forget. What's another thing we can't enjoy, can't control?
Creator,
What?
creator,
Say it again.
creator,
Yeah. Creator, enjoyer, controller.
Proprietor.
Say it again.
Proprietor.
Yeah.
Independence.
doer.
Yeah,
I'm not the
all
doer.
those things. Yeah. Like when you suffer, you're not independent because the suffering is controlling you. You can't enjoy because you're suffering. And if you were the controller, you wouldn't be suffering. Right? So in that stage when you realize you're not the enjoyer, controller, proprietor, etc., you get a lot of realization. That's one reason. And another obvious reason, I think, is you just become more dependent on Krishna. Suffering is a kind of austerity. And when you do austerity, you get realization. Like anyone who's distributed Prabhupada's books and has done it and when it was difficult or austere, you always get realization because it's purifying, because it's difficult, right? Anything you've ever done that was difficult in bhakti, I'm sure you got realization. So tapas means heat. Tapasya means heat. Did you know that? Means heat, but Prabhupada describes tapasya as voluntarily suffering for spiritual advancement. So if we don't want to voluntarily suffer, sometimes Krishna says, okay, I'll make you involuntarily suffer. So you'll do some tapasya because you don't want to do it. And then you'll get realization. So sometimes that happens. So from material enjoyment, the only realization you get is that this is not making me happy. But most realizations come from austerity, either voluntary or forced. A few years ago, I was in Lithuania. I think it was November. It was really cold and we went out for a walk, but it was really windy. So, you know what it's like when it's cold and windy? It's like the suffering is increased like about 4 times, isn't it? Like if it's cold, it's like, okay, it's cold. I'll just wear warm clothes. But if it's windy, it's like somebody's hitting a sore on your arm and they're just banging it. So we were walking through the ice in the wind. There was no way that anyone in their right mind, unless they're from Alaska or something, or Siberia, would think this is not suffering. It was just like, at least for someone from Florida, yeah, that was like, it was just like, this was hell. Like, you're all living in hell. Why are you living here? No question of thinking that this is enjoyable. So sometimes when we think I can enjoy, I'm the enjoyer, the controller, the proprietor, all these things, Krishna will go, yeah, you think you are? Boom. Then you get a realization. No, you're not. And you get all, and then when you realize, no, I'm not the controller and enjoyer, then you're not competing with Krishna. And then it's like the door opens for realization. What realization do you get when you think you're the enjoyer? Only the realization that I'm the enjoyer. That's about it, right? That's as far as it goes. And then later on, the realization that thinking I'm the enjoyer is causing me suffering. Is that okay, Samadarshini? I always say there's two kinds of austerity, the kind you do voluntarily and the kinds that forced on you. But you get more bonus points if you do it voluntarily. And if you do it, then I often think, if I do it voluntarily, then Krishna doesn't have to force it on me. Although suffering is always there in the material world. But if Krishna wants to give you some realization and give you a little smack, you just do austerity, you'll get the realization that he doesn't have to smack you because you smacked yourself. Do you know there are some devotees who love austerity? Like they will go out of their way to do austerity. Did you know that? Because they get so much strength from austerity and so much realization. They're always doing austerity. You know, they could take a warm shower, they'll take a cold shower. They could get up at 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, they'll get up at 2 o'clock. They could do purikram with shoes, they'll do it barefoot. You know, just they'll always opt for austerity because austerity is their comfort zone, because that's where they're the most Krishna conscious. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Like, do you ever skip a meal and you felt really good, physically and spiritually? Yeah, you did some austerity, or let you didn't eat the sweets, or you vowed not to eat paneer for 2 days, or 2 weeks, or 2 years, or whatever, and you feel good. You disciplined yourself. So here's a little insight into this. The human body, as distinguished from animals, is designed to be happy by doing austerity. Isn't that interesting? Which is the complete opposite of what materialists think. They believe you'll be happy with comfort, right? But actual fact is by doing austerity, you're happy. You go to Govardhan, take off your shoes, you do a parikrama around Govardhan, as many people do on Ekadasi. And it's just walking, for like 6, 7, 8 hours. And that austerity will give you so many realizations. You'll finish that austerity and there's nothing, there's no drug you could take, there's no Disney World ride you could go on that could give you that same feeling as you get from doing that austerity. How many of you have done Govardhan Parikrama? Raise your hand. Keep your hand raised if you agree with me. Yeah. And all those who haven't done it, no, you should go do it. Get on the next plane and go do it. Now's a good time to do it because it's cold and the austerity is even greater. Or you could wait till June, July. Super hot. You probably get sick though. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Human body is meant, like we get so much realization and enjoyment from doing austerity, although we don't think like that. We don't like austerity. And as devotees, if we can learn to like austerity, that's good. Women, you don't count. You don't have to like austerity. Your bodies weren't built for it. So you're off the hook. I'm just talking to the men now. But anyway, ladies, if you want to be bold, and it's harder for you to do austerity than men. Since your mind body is built differently. But still in Krishna consciousness, whatever austerity we can do. That'll make us happy. Well, you do austerity by having kids. You do austerity by tolerating your husband. Right? Hare Krishna. Next question. I was wondering with regard to when a living entity enters into a new mother, then is miscarried, with all that goes into finding new birth, new body. What happens in transition between old and new body? And why does it get cut short before birth? General answer without being specific about a certain person. It could be that they were a woman who aborted a child. That could be one reason. As Prabhupada said, women who have abortion, they will be aborted also. If anyone you know is thinking about having an abortion, that's the karma for it, then that will happen to you. Another reason could be due to some karma, which we may not know specifically. A person had to undergo that, like time in the womb and miscarriage, and then we'll have to do it again. Sometimes for devotees, it's different, where there's some contamination, and then occasionally a devotee child will die at birth or will die shortly after. And so we understand there was just some little karma purification, and then they go back to Godhead. And according to Bhagavatam, generally, there's a transition period where one prepares for the next womb. And I mean, I think the real answer to your question is just don't come back. Then you don't have to deal with this. And just the general answer is there's some karma. We may not know exactly why. Which these are complicated questions to answer. But I think the real answer is if I don't come back, then I wouldn't have this question and I wouldn't have to deal with this question. And that was generally Prabhupada's answer. Like, just don't come back. You know, a lot of times we suffer. It's the nature of material life, right? And every time Prabhupada says you should go back to Godhead in this lifetime, you can interpret it or paraphrase it and say, Prabhupada saying, if you want to end your suffering, like I can't stop your suffering in this world. Your father or mother probably is going to die before you. You'll probably have some accident or illness, break something. I sprained my ankle twice. I had a cracked rib, I had a cracked hip, and I had this surgery, and I can't remember everything. So, you know, we've all had those things, right? Isn't it? I sprained this. Oh, I sprained my knee also in like 3 places. It's just so. And if you ask me, oh, can you help me? Can you do something? You know, my father's 100 years old and he's suffering from a disease. Can I do something? I don't have mystic power. So Prabhupada's, you know, answer was not like, I can do something for you, although I think Prabhupada could if he wanted, but he didn't want to be known as a guru who was healing people because people would come to him for healing physically, not spiritually. But in Prabhupada's mission to help us get back to Godhead, he's really saying, this is how I can help you because this will never happen to you again. Like I can't stop your father from dying. But if you give him Krishna consciousness, then he'll never die again. And then that way I can solve the problem. So, you know, this question, we could ask other questions like this. Why do people suffer? You know, what's the reason? Like, you know, why are all the people in Gaza suffering? Do they all have the same karma? Is it Israel that's the cause of their suffering and they're innocent? It's like you can't really you can give a general answer. But whatever your answer is, these things are going to go on anyway, and your answer may be wrong. It's Israel, it's Netanyahu, it's his fault. Or it's the collective karma of these people for something their ancestors did 1,000 years ago. You could speculate. But taking birth in this world, it puts us in a vulnerable position because you never know. Here we are in America, the most powerful country in the world, right? Does that mean that North Korea can't send an atomic bomb and, you know, destroy half of America or any country with atomic weapons? Yeah, it could happen. Does it mean our economy can't fall apart? Right? China wants to, what do they want to do? They want to not trade oil anymore in dollars. They want to change that. America owes, China bought America's debt, a lot of it. So we pay money every year to pay our debt back to China, and they build weapons with the money we send them. So, you know, it's like very precarious. You know, America, this big, powerful country, we're, you know, precarious. Want to hear something funny? I don't know if it's funny, but I was doing a guided meditation. I was recording a guided meditation before coronavirus, like maybe 2 months before. And the guided meditation was about how we're not in control. And I said, even a little virus could kill millions of us. And 2 months later, that's what happened. So you don't know. Who knows what virus is coming up next? And how many people will be affected by the virus and by the vaccine. You don't know. So we're a precarious position. So the answer to your questions too is don't come back, and you won't have this question. You won't need an answer to this question if you don't come back. And I think that's Prabhupada's answer. Because if you see, like, when there were a lot of difficulties the devotees went through, and they brought it to Prabhupada, you generally don't see him being, quote unquote, sympathetic, empathetic. You see him being more realistic. In the vein of, this is what I've been teaching you. I've been teaching you, this is the nature of the material world. So why are you surprised? Like sometimes a devotee would come to Prabhupada and say, my relative has this disease and is dying. Even sometimes it was a young child. And if you came to me and said that, and I didn't say, I'm really sorry to hear that, I really feel for you, you'd probably hate me, right? But Prabhupada, when they would bring it to Prabhupada, he would be realistic. Like the soul doesn't die, take shelter of Krishna, like that. Because for Prabhupada, that was the solution. Like sympathy, of course, is nice, but it's not a solution. It's like I can't change what's going to happen by my sympathy. Right? Sometimes people, they have bad relationships and their husband or wife leaves them. And, it's like they'll write me as if I could do something. I mean, I can talk to them, but what can we do? We're in the material world and these things happen. And Prabhupada wanted us to, accept that and understand that. And so when it happens, we're prepared for it. I think I don't know if you've ever seen a devotee, when something bad happens, just become very unstable. And when I see that, I think this is a little paradoxical in the sense that Prabhupada has really prepared you for this. Like for the calamities of life, he's prepared you for it. He's given you the knowledge necessary to deal with it. So I think it's important to understand that. When devotees were lamenting because Prabhupada was so ill and so thin, and Prabhupada would say, but this is what I taught you, that this is what happens. So why are you lamenting? It's like you should expect it, that kind of thing. It's heavy, but reality is heavy. And because reality is heavy, we don't want to confront reality because it's heavy. We'd rather just watch a movie and eat popcorn. Then we don't have to think about reality, right? It's true, right? That's why a lot of times you'll see that if someone is speaking the truth, like nobody wants to hear it. Like if you have a politician that's completely truthful, probably always lose the election because people want to hear the false promises and paint the picture of how everything's going to be beautiful and so on. And when someone speaks the reality, like we're this close to nuclear war and the economy, we're this close to the crash of the economy and this and that. Like, I don't want to hear that. That's depressing. Well, it's more depressing when it happens and you're not prepared for it. I think one of the heaviest things that Prabhupada said was, he said there's going to be nuclear war. And all the devotees, you could imagine how they were feeling. They were shocked. Like, what are we going to do? Prabhupada, what are we going to do? Chant Hare Krishna. Like, like, what do you do when there's suffering and misery? What do you do? I don't know what to do. Yeah. Well, what about chanting Hare Krishna? Have you thought of that? And then Prabhupada gave another answer, which is like really interesting. Very, very interesting. One devotee was asking, this question, what are we going to do? Let me just close the door. Some ghost just walked in. It opened by itself. Ah. So this, he said, Prabhupada, what are we going to do? And Prabhupada said, you are going to die today or tomorrow. So, like, what's your problem if you die today? If you don't die today, it'll be tomorrow. Because, in other words, the devotee was saying, well, what are we going to do? War comes, we'll die. And Prabhupada said, yes, you will die today or tomorrow. So what's your problem? Wow, that's heavy, isn't it? Guru is heavy. And he wants to make this point. And we're like, we want to avoid it all because it's like, oh my God, there's war, people are going to die. This is horrible. And Prabhupada's point, yeah, well, without war, they're going to die also. And that's horrible as well. So if you die now or in 10 years, you're still going to die. So therefore what? Take shelter of Krishna. It's the like there's no new program. The world's going to hell. What do? Take shelter of Krishna. The world becomes utopia and paradise. What do? Take shelter of Krishna. It's like there's no new news. And if even everything in the world is perfect, still there's birth, old age, disease, and death, right? So what are we going to do? So that was Prabhupada's mood. Sometimes you might read stories about the old days and Prabhupada disciples, and you might think, wow, devotees were really fanatical in those days. Well, because Prabhupada was preaching very direct, very strongly. So we were representing that mood. It's not that we don't want to be sympathetic or empathetic. Prabhupada wanted us to be realistic. Hare Krishna. Okay, next question. I'm struggling to balance sadhana, work, home life, children, and marriage. I'm also studying again, which involves a lot of reading. It's taking up a lot of my spare time to read Prabhupada's books. So I suppose my question, how do I balance it? All without giving less to my daughter sadhana. I don't think you can balance it all. Something's got to go. It's just a question of what. I mean, sometimes there's too much on your plate and you can't eat it all. So you have to decide, what you're going to eat and what you're not going to eat. The other question would be to ask yourself, why did I put so much on my plate? Do I need to have this all on my plate? Because the consequence of having this on my plate is I can't eat it all. If I eat it all, I'll have a breakdown, burnout. So there's two things that I've seen. Either we put too much on our plate and we didn't have to, or 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 life puts too much on our plate. And life puts too much on our plate and we have no choice. So then you have to decide, what you're going to minimize or eliminate. Because usually when you focus on one thing, you have to minimize something else if you don't have enough time. And if you minimize your daughter, you're going to regret it. And she's going to regret it. It's like, okay, I'll say something. I'll just be traditional. Traditionally, when you had kids, that's what you did. You took care of them. You didn't do anything else. That was, up until like 50, 60 years ago. But that's how the history of the world has been. You have kids and that's your priority. And then all of a sudden, things changed. So kids are one thing, and sometimes they get in the way of other things. But traditionally, they were the thing. They didn't get in the way of anything else because there wasn't anything else that you would do, allow yourself to do, that would get in the way of them because that's, you had them. So it's, like sometimes you'll hear stories where a child feels neglected and they'll say, why did you have me if you, didn't really want to take care of me? They'll feel like that. They'll feel neglected. So it's something to consider. Yeah. So you don't want to neglect your daughter, so don't. And then everything else is going to adjust around that. And you may know that letter where Prabhupada wrote to Pujari, who just had a child, and she said her Pujari work is being compromised. And Prabhupada said, your child's your deity. Now you devote yourself to taking care of your child. So that's just normal, but society today is not normal, so they don't think like that. Right? Like, why'd you have kids if you don't want to take care of them? Well, they're getting in the way of my career. They're getting in the way of my hobbies or whatever. Yeah. Traditional families never thought that way. It was always the kids first. Whatever they needed, they got it. And then the parents, what they wanted was always second. Similarly, ladies, check this out. Traditionally, ladies married to serve their kids and their husband. That's why they did it. Which today sounds kind of like, that's boring. Like, why do I want to do that? But if you look at marriage traditionally, the woman is like, she just, made sacrifice. She served. That was her dharma. That's just what she did. And the husband, provided. And she took care of the kids in the house. And that gets, for modern women, that gets kind of boring, doesn't it? It's taking care of kids and cooking and cleaning. We need excitement. But traditionally, that's what they did. I was in India once staying with a devotee. And I said, well, this was like, at least for the older generation. like people who are now 40s and up. I said, why is divorce so rare in that generation? And he said, because we grew up with the idea you only get married once. That was like ingrained within us. Marriage is once. We don't grow up with that idea, do we? Marriage is once. If it works, it's once. If it's twice and three times if it doesn't. So traditionally, women grew up with this idea that my dharma is service. I'm meant for service to my husband and to my children. That was the traditional role. We don't grow up that way anymore. And the children suffer. And one wise lady said, you can evaluate the value of things by how it affects the children. So very interesting if you look at decisions parents make and society makes. And you look at it in terms of how that's going to affect the children. You will see that the best decisions will always be best for the kids and vice versa. So something to think about. Rajat asked, what's more important, association of pure devotee or holy dham yatra? As both together is seldom available. Well, if you go to yatra, there's where all the devotees are. But if there's no pure devotees there, I would go to where the pure devotee is. You know this story? Prabhupada was at a darshan of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in Vrindavan, I believe it was Vrindavan. And during the darshan, the devotee announced that there's going to be a parikrama to the 7 temples of Vrindavan, I believe. Well, anyway, there was going to be a parikrama. And whoever wanted to go on the parikrama would have to leave now, and whoever didn't would stay. So Prabhupada stayed, and he thought, like, what am I going to see in a parikrama? I'm with a pure devotee, I can hear. And you see by hearing. If I go on parikrama, I'll just see with my eyes. It's true, like you go on parikrama, if you don't hear from the pure devotees, you don't know how to see. You don't know what to see. You just see with your eye. Some, trash on the ground, and some people, poor people, and think, why is Vrindavan, why don't they fix it up? And, they need economic development and this, and, that's how you'll think. So, yeah, pure devotee always. Wherever there's a pure devotee, go grab his feet, hold on. Brian is asking, we're pleased to see and hear you. I notice you're starting to cough. If you slow down a little bit, you may not have trouble, yeah. You seem to be excited, yeah. I'm always excited to talk about Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay. How can we understand why devotees who have rendered service for years might commit suicide? What happens to them after such an act? Are there any verses in the scriptures that provide clarity on this? Of course, we could only speak generally here. Suicide is generally the next stage after depression. And there's this feeling that I am no value, I am of not value to anyone. My life has no value. Nobody would care if I die. And so I would rephrase this question, and I would say, I think the question really is, how can someone who's done devotional service for so many years have thoughts and feelings and beliefs which are diametrically opposed to Krishna consciousness, because that feeling is completely, it's like, it's not how an advanced devotee thinks. But anyway, and one answer is it's a psychological problem that was never addressed. And it finally, because it wasn't addressed, at some point in their life, it manifested, the illness manifested fully, and that was the result. Either suicide or depression or some other symptom that wasn't addressed. Now, the one could ask a question, well, was there anything in Krishna consciousness that activated that? It's possible that one felt like I'm a failure. I can't please my guru. I can't follow the regulative principles. I've disappointed my guru. There are things, if you have that nature, then those things could foster that, right? They could be a catalyst, isn't it? If I feel I'm a failure, if I have a nature to be depressed, and then I don't do well in bhakti, there's more to be depressed about, right? Isn't it? So now, in some cases, people come to bhakti who are depressed and they overcome that depression. But in other cases, I would at least say, if you have a nature to put yourself down, to feel guilty, to shame yourself, inclinations for depression and so forth, berating yourself, then you have to be careful, because you could find a lot of reasons to do all those things and validate them with our philosophy, right? I'm not a pure devotee. I can't please my guru. I can't follow the principles. I can't do anything right. Nobody likes me, etc., etc. So that these all validate all those feelings of guilt, shame, depression, and so forth. And if it's not addressed, then when depression gets extremely serious, then that's when one becomes suicidal, because what's the point of living? Of course, one Krishna conscious solution, which is not going to work for everyone, is that your life does not belong to you, so you can't take it. It belongs to Krishna. And another thing, which is interesting, if you're a Brahmin and you commit suicide, you get the karma for killing a Brahmin. Wow. That's a huge sin. Killing a Brahmin is a huge sin. And you kill yourself, you killed a Brahmin. And killing yourself also, you get the karma for murder. So, and as I've said a million times, it will now be 1,000,001. Prabhupada came to the West to make us happy, not to make us depressed. But some people who, when they come to Krishna consciousness makes them depressed because they feel like a failure. And that was not Prabhupada's objective, that you would come to Krishna consciousness and feel bad. You would come and be happy. So if you ever find that Krishna consciousness is making you feel bad, please understand that it's not meant to do that. That's you. That's your interpretation of it. But, you know, a lot of times, if that's how we feel, it's probably how we feel about everything in life. So, you know, whether it's Krishna consciousness or just life in general, we feel bad. So we should recognize that. Yeah, you can make breakfast for me. You can surprise me. Right, bread. You can have it ready at 10 to 9. Mm. Uh, mm. Stu says, I've recently completed a course on psychotherapy and noticed that most existential, transpersonal, and humanistic modalities are influenced by Mayavad philosophy. Can't seem to find any influence by Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Why is this, I wonder? I really feel that there is so much that our tradition can influence this field and get the message out there, even the Sattvic lifestyle. And Stu is the one who's going to do it. Howdy Bo. Stu, I have observed that when you notice a problem, it means Krishna is choosing you to solve it. Like you see a problem in the world or a problem in ISKCON, you should think, Krishna has allowed me to see this problem because he wants me to solve it. So you have your life's mission now. You're always wondering what to do with your life. Now you know what to do. Hare Krishna. Hmm. What about strict fasting? Kadasi, if you like. Ryan says, I suffer every day from multiple spinal and brain injuries, but I always know this is Krishna's plan. I learn from every new pain or setback. I praise Krishna for my suffering because it helps me understand my child's suffering. Cannot talk to us and tell us how it hurts. Wow. Yeah. We can even appreciate the suffering. That's amazing, isn't it? Also, my pain forces me to lay down and chant because that's the only way to comfort it. Wow. Stu says, do you think austerity is surrender? And how would we know we're doing it for Krishna and not for ourselves? Self-honesty would be the answer. Um, you know what I think? I think you know. If you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for Krishna. You may not want to admit it, but I think if you just stop and consider, like in our humility class, I don't know if we're going to do it in this upcoming workshop, but when we had the class live, had a question and said, note down every time in the past when you did something where your motivation was not purely to please Krishna, but there was some motivation for recognition. Well, that's a heavy question, right? And after we did that exercise, one devotee said, I don't think I've ever done anything that didn't have some motivation for recognition. That's honesty. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but that's honesty. So if we're willing to be honest, then we'll understand our motivation. Like, have you ever said something, Stu or any of you, have you ever said something kind of toot your own horn, maybe in a subtle way? And after you reflected, either right after or an hour later or the next day, I said that to impress them. There was no need to say it. So it's a kind of insecurity that I need to impress people. The only person I'm trying to impress is my guru and Prabhupada and Krishna. Not impress, but please. That's our motive. So as you advance in bhakti, that motive becomes more and more to the forefront, and every other motive starts to fade and eventually dissipate. That's what pure bhakti means. I just want to please Krishna, that's it. I'm not doing this to bring attention to myself. That's what I did before I was a devotee. So if what I did before I was a devotee, I bring that into bhakti, then I'm pouring poison on it, basically. Isn't it? Like I want to be a devotee. I want to give up. I want to change my life. I want to get out of the material world, etc. And then I join ISKCON and bring the material world with me into ISKCON. Like, what could be worse than that? Right? So, we don't want to do that. And so self-honesty means I recognize that. And as I recognize it, hopefully my desire will be strong enough to eliminate it. Of course, I have to have some level of purity to even recognize it. Right? Because false ego doesn't want to recognize that. False ego wants to say, Stu's the man. He's perfect. False ego doesn't want to say, hey, look at your motivation. That was motivated by something other than Krishna's pleasure. You want to get some position or some recognition or whatever. So every question of how do I know? My answer is if the question is in terms of motivation, my answer is always self-honesty. And you will know. You will know through self-honesty if you're honest enough. So as far as austerity, just take birth as a woman, according to Kamaniya, and you'll have plenty of austerity. Abhishek says, Bhishma Dev's siblings died a little time after birth. I mean, look at, the Pandavas and kind of all the suffering, Then, why do devotees in the Bhagavatam suffer? Because they're teaching us a couple things that even pure devotee in this world may suffer, but they're teaching us how to deal with the suffering. So, why do we need to learn how to deal with the suffering? Because Krishna is saying, because that's the nature of the world, they're suffering. So you got to learn how to deal with it. Kamini says, some devotees think they can emulate Prabhupada and respond coldly to devotees when they express suffering. Yeah. Prabhupada did it, it wasn't cold, it was from his compassion. As our Acharya, yes. Can you speak about tolerance, patience, surrender? That's from Facebook. Well, tolerance simply means to not be upset by things that upset you. And surrender means do things which help your bhakti, even though you don't like them. And don't do things you like that don't help your bhakti. And have faith that Krishna will protect you. Have faith that Krishna will maintain you. That's really a big one, isn't it? That's part of surrender. Like Krishna, I'm giving myself to you. So if I'm going to be able to do that, then I have to have faith that you'll take care of me. You see, the thing about surrender is that as you advance, you realize that surrender is natural. I'm surrendered to my dog. I'm surrendered to my garden. I'm surrendered to my guitar. I'm surrendered to my mind. I'm surrendered to so many things. I give myself to these things. So as you advance in bhakti, you just want to give yourself to Krishna. That's where your pleasure lies. So, we say, how do you surrender? Well, just become advanced. And you'll naturally want to surrender. You will, like when you're advanced, you don't ask the question how to surrender. You're too busy surrendering to ask the question. So if you're asking the question, something's wrong with you, in a sense. Okay. I'm just giving brief answers now because it's late. Yeah. That was the letter I was referring to coming in about Arundhati. Prabhupada said, your child's your deity. Okay. Radha Priya wants me to stop. Yeah. Hour and a half was good. The last half hour was harder. But we're almost finished. Hare Krishna. Why the mind tends to judge, point out, see the bad? Is it because something is out of their belief system, attacks against it? Why the mind, this pattern of behavior, tends to separate instead of, well, there could be many reasons why we notice the bad. But I think it's kind of a mindset because you could notice the good also. When you notice the good, it doesn't mean the bad's not there, right? It just means you're not noticing it. So I think the question to ask yourself is, if the good is there and the bad is there, why do I notice the bad and not the good? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I need? Like, you really need to answer that question for yourself. Like, why do I need to look at the bad? And I could give an answer from my perspective. And if I were to answer from my perspective, I would say, because it makes me feel better than the person I'm criticizing. And it makes me feel good about myself that I'm better. And I think that's a common reason. But another reason may be that we're just negative. That's our nature. So that may be something to consider also. Maybe you've always been that way. And really, if you've always been that way, then you really need to learn to appreciate it. Because many of the things you criticize, you actually need in your life, like those people you criticize. When they die and so forth, you realize, oh, I missed them. Or I needed them in some way, or they helped me. Or the world is a worse place now that they're gone. When a devotee had trouble with another devotee, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would tell the critical devotee, I want you to say something nice about that devotee. Try to switch it. Because, when you don't like what a devotee's doing, you're focused on what they're doing wrong, isn't it? And so shift it. And he's forcing them to see something good in them. And they weren't saying anything good, they're only saying bad. And he's forcing them to see good. So he's like forcing gratitude on them, even they don't want to be. He's forcing appreciation. And that changes your heart. And I would say appreciation is sattva-gun, and criticism and negativity is tamagun. And so if we want to look at it from the Gita's perspective, that means we're being overwhelmed by tamagun, really. That's what's happening. And we don't want to associate with tamaguna. So if you don't want to associate with tamaguna, don't criticize, don't be negative. I don't know if you saw that post I put out. I said, every problem you see in ISKCON is an opportunity for service because somebody needs to solve that problem. It's also an opportunity to be critical, isn't it? It's an opportunity. Every problem you see in ISKCON is either an opportunity for service or an opportunity for offense, isn't it? Pretty much. You ever read something on the internet, this devotee did this or that, and you start making offenses in your mind or verbally, or you get on your computer and make a few offenses. So every problem we see is an opportunity for service to help solve the problem or to make offense, depending on what mode of nature you allow yourself to be influenced by. We're so much in illusion that we can be happy in this world. Whenever something unpleasant happens, it's Krishna reminding us that this is not a happy place. Yeah, when you forget. You need to stub your toe when you forget. Well, just when you think everything's perfect. You finally took your vacation. You're in some tropical paradise, walking on the beach, and you get stung by a jellyfish. Yeah. It's just, what can you do? Hmm. Um, oh, Gabrielle saying she got a lot of criticism. It depends on the people who are criticizing you. If those who criticize you are your well-wishers, then you should listen to it. If those people criticizing you are envious of you, it's probably best to disassociate as far as possible. At least if you can't physically disassociate from their consciousness. Some people need to criticize. It's just if they don't criticize, there's no reason for them to live. They wake up every morning, with who am I going to criticize today? That's what they live for. And if that's the case, then why take them serious? Why let them bother you? One teacher he said something really interesting. He said, some people wake up every day waiting to be offended. So get on the internet, find something to offend you. Okay, an hour and a half was good. The last half hour was a little hard, but we're going to end now. And unless you're in Alachua, we won't see you till next Thursday. Thursday at 7 a.m. my time. We're doing Chinese, and you're welcome to come. We're discussing forgiveness as the topic of that class. And we're reading everything Prabhupada said on the topic. I have a huge document, so it's interesting. It's more of a philosophical than a practical class. If you want the practical class, you can go on our app, sattva-jivanam.mn.co. Someone can put that in the chat. And that course is there, forgiveness. And we're now working on a book. I have devotees working with me on a book on forgiveness. Hare Krishna. We're working on a book on japa. We're working on a book on self-care. working on a book on forgiveness, and I'm working on my Prabhupada book. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.